Of course they put me at the kids' table. I was 31 years old, sitting between my 12-year-old nephew and a booster seat that nobody was using, at my own brother's 10-year anniversary dinner. My sister-in-law had reserved the private dining room at Harlow's, this new farm-to-table place in Naperville that everyone had been talking about. White linen tablecloths, a prix-fixe menu, soft lighting that made everyone look like they were already nostalgic for the evening. It was the kind of place where the bread came with whipped butter shaped like a little flower, and the server introduced himself by first name and said things like, "We source our carrots from a family farm 40 minutes north of here." I knew before I walked in where I'd be sitting. My mom had texted me the seating chart 3 days before. "We had to arrange by family units," she wrote. "You know how it is." I didn't respond. What I knew was this. My brother Holt and his wife Serena were seated at the center table with their closest friends. My parents were at the adjacent table with Serena's parents and her aunt and uncle who had flown in from Phoenix. And I was at the side table near the window, next to Holt's kids from his first marriage. Zach, 12, who was polite and bored, and little Piper, 4, who was asleep in her car seat by the time the appetizers arrived. Nobody introduced me when I walked in. I found my name card myself, between Zachary and a small laminated card that said, "Piper, high chair." I sat down and unfolded my napkin. My mom waved from across the room. Warm, quick, the kind of wave you give someone you're glad is there, but don't need to talk to right now. My dad gave me a nod. Holt was already holding court, laughing at something one of his friends had said, his arm around Serena, the two of them glowing the way people do when they know a room is arranged around them. I ordered a sparkling water and looked at the bread menu. Here is what I had never told anyone in that room 8 months before that dinner. My interior design firm, the one I'd started out of a second bedroom in my condo, the one I'd funded with 3 years of savings and one very uncomfortable conversation with a bank loan officer, had signed a contract with a hospitality group out of Chicago to redesign 4 of their boutique hotels across the Midwest. The total project value was $2.3 million. It was the biggest contract my firm had ever landed. It was, by most measures, the thing I had been working towards since I was 24 and sitting at a drafting table at 11 at night wondering if I was insane for leaving a stable job to do this. I had not told my family, not because I was hiding it exactly, more because I had stopped expecting them to understand it. My parents had always treated my career the way you treat a houseplant in a room you don't really use. They acknowledged it existed, occasionally asked if it was still alive, and assumed it would probably be fine without much attention. When I left my project management job to start the firm, my mom had said, "Well, I hope you know what you're doing." My dad had nodded in the way he nodded at things he'd already decided not to think about. Holt had said, "You're brave, I'll give you that," which I knew meant you're making a mistake. For a long time, I thought I might be making a mistake. There were 2 years in there where I wasn't sure I could cover my own rent. I took on every small job I could find. Residential clients, a dental office, a yoga studio that paid half up front and then disappeared for 4 months. I learned what it meant to follow up on an invoice 6 times. I learned what it meant to sleep badly for reasons that had nothing to do with the hour. And then slowly, things shifted. My work started getting noticed. I was featured in a regional design publication. A commercial client referred me to another commercial client. The hospitality group found me through a hotel lobby renovation I'd done in Wicker Park that got photographed for a trade magazine. The contracts got bigger. My team grew from just me to 4 people, then 7. None of this had made it into conversation at family dinners. I had tried a few times to share things. A project I was proud of, a milestone that felt significant, and each time the response had been the kind of polite, glancing interest that told me the subject was already changing. "That's great, honey." "Oh, Holt, tell them about the promotion." So I stopped bringing it up. It was easier than the alternative. The appetizers came out. Holt gave a short toast. Gracious, funny, the kind of toast that reminds you why people like him, and everyone raised their glasses and said "Hear, hear," and the evening settled into the pleasant hum of a room full of people who are comfortable with each other. I talked to Zach about his travel soccer league. He was serious about it, detailed, and I liked listening to him. Piper woke up briefly, ate 3 bites of bread, and fell back asleep. One of Holt's friends, a guy named Fletcher who worked in commercial real estate, leaned across the table at one point and asked me what I did. "Interior design," I said. "Commercial mostly, hospitality and retail." "Oh, nice," he said, already turning back to his own conversation. I ate my soup. My mom came over between courses to check on Piper and stayed to tell me about Holt's new car, a detail I had not been aware I needed. She also told me that my cousin Dana had just gotten engaged, which I was genuinely happy to hear. Then she smoothed my hair. I'm 31. She still smooths my hair and went back to her table. I was doing fine. I want to be clear about that. I had been to enough of these dinners to know how to be fine at them. You find the person who wants to talk, you listen well, you don't volunteer too much about yourself, you eat the food, which is usually good, and you leave with no outstanding emotional debt in either direction. I was good at this. I had made my peace with it, or something close enough to peace that I could call it that without feeling like I was lying. Then Fletcher came back. He had his phone out, half turned toward me, and there was something different in his expression, not unfriendly, more like recalibrated. "Hey, sorry to bug you," he said. "Did you say Harmon's Studio? Is that your firm?" "Yes," I said. I was looking something up. Are you the Jess Harmon who did the Wicker Park Collective? The hotel on Milwaukee?" "That's me," I said. He turned his phone around. He had pulled up an article, the one from Hospitality Design magazine, from about a year ago. The hotel lobby, all warm wood and textured plaster, and the lighting I had spent 3 weeks getting right. My name in the byline, a pull quote from me about the design philosophy. "My company is actually working with the Aldridge Group," he said. "We're doing the real estate side on their next property. They're in the middle of a pretty significant design contract right now." "I know," I said. "That's us." Fletcher looked at me for a moment. "Wait, Harmon Studio is the firm they signed with?" "We signed in February," I said. He sat back slightly. That's a substantial contract. The Aldridge Group doesn't work with small firms." He paused. "No offense. None taken," I said. I watched him process this. He was doing the math, I could tell. Running back through the conversation, the seating arrangement, the way I'd been sitting here for 2 hours between a 12-year-old and an empty booster seat. He looked up toward the center table, then back at me. "Does Holt know you're working with Aldridge?" he said. "I don't think so," I said. Fletcher was not a subtle man. I want to say that with some affection, because what happened next would have been very different if he'd been subtle. He stood up from his chair. He had migrated over during dessert, sitting in the empty seat across from me, and he said, in a voice that was clearly not meant only for me, "Holt. Hey, did you know your sister is doing the Aldridge Hotel project?" The table went quiet in the particular way that tables go quiet when something has shifted. Holt turned. "What?" "The Aldridge Group," Fletcher said. "In Chicago. Their boutique hotel expansion. The $2.3 million contract. That's Jess." Holt looked at me. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He laughed. Not a mean laugh, a confused one. "The Aldridge job is yours?" "Harmon Studios, yes," I said. "I didn't. How did I not know that?" "You didn't ask," I said, and I kept my voice light because I meant it lightly, mostly. Serena, his wife, had turned now too. She was looking at me with an expression I didn't know how to read at first. Something that wasn't quite disbelief but was in the neighborhood of it. "You designed the Wicker Park Collective?" she said. "I did." "We stayed there," she said, "for our anniversary last year. I talked about that lobby for weeks. I remember you sending a photo," my mom said, from the next table. She had been listening. Everyone had been listening. Serena shook her head slowly. "That was you." "That was me," I said. My dad leaned forward. "How big did you say the contract was, Dad?" Holt said. "I'm asking." $2.3 million, I said. Total project value across 4 properties. There was a silence that had weight to it. The kind that fills up a room the way water fills a glass, quietly, completely, from the bottom up. My mom said, "Jess, why didn't you tell us?" And here is the thing I had been thinking about for years. The answer I had turned over so many times it had worn smooth, because you never asked. Not the way you ask about things that matter to you. Not the way you asked about Holt's promotion, or Dana's engagement, or the new car. You asked about my work the way you check a box, and I learned early that the box didn't need much content to be considered checked. I didn't say that. What I said was, I wasn't sure it would land the same way in conversation. My mom looked at me for a long moment. I think she understood what I meant. I think she had probably understood it for a while and just hadn't wanted to look at it directly. Fletcher, to his credit, had the grace to become very interested in his dessert after that. Zach, 12 years old and sharper than anyone was giving him credit for, leaned over to me and said, "That was kind of a big deal, right?" "Kind of," I said. "Cool," he said, and went back to his creme brulee. Holt came over to my table after the plates were cleared. He pulled out the chair next to me, the one Piper wasn't using, and sat down. He was quiet for a moment, which was not like him. Holt was a talker, had always been a talker, the kind of person who filled silence because silence made him uncomfortable. "I should have asked more," he said. "You were busy," I said. Don't let me off that easy." I looked at him. He looked older than I thought of him, sitting there, lines around his eyes I hadn't noticed before. 42, and trying to be honest, which is not always easy at 42. "I think I told myself you were fine," he said, "because you always seem fine. And it was easier to believe you were fine than to wonder if I was dropping the ball." "I was fine," I said. "I am fine." "I know, that's almost worse." I didn't have a response to that, so I let it sit. "The Aldridge job," he said, "that's real. That's not small." "I know it's not small. I'm proud of you," he said. "I should have said that sooner. I should have said it without needing Fletcher to tell me in front of everyone." He paused. "I'm sorry it took me this long." I looked down at my coffee cup. The thing about apologies like that, honest ones, the ones that don't have an exit built in, is that they require something of you too. They ask you to actually receive them, which is harder than it sounds when you've spent years learning not to need anything. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it, even if I wasn't quite ready to mean everything it implied. My mom called me the next morning at 8:45. I was on my second cup of coffee, already at my desk, going through notes on the second Aldridge property, a 1920s building in Milwaukee we were converting. All original terrazzo floors and a service elevator that we were turning into a feature rather than a problem. "I want to explain something," she said, without saying good morning first. "Okay," I said. "When you started the business, I was scared for you. You know how your father and I grew up. Neither of our families had money, we never had a safety net, and when you walked away from a stable job, I kept thinking about all the ways it could go wrong. I don't think I ever let myself think about the ways it could go right." I was quiet. "That's not an excuse," she said. "I know it's not an excuse. I want you to know where it was coming from." "I know where it was coming from," I said. And I did. I had always known in the way that you know a thing but keep it at a slight distance because knowing it fully makes the hurt more complicated. "The hotel?" she said. "I looked it up this morning, the one Serena sent a photo of. I found the article." She paused. "Jess, it's beautiful." "Thank you, Mom. I should have looked sooner." "Yeah," I said. "You should have." She laughed, small and a little pained. "Okay. I deserved that." "You asked, though," I said. "You asked this morning. That's something." We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing consequential, my grandmother's upcoming birthday, whether the Milwaukee winters were going to be a problem for the renovation timeline, a recipe she had made last week that she thought I'd like. Normal things. The kind of conversation I had always wanted us to be able to have, where I wasn't bracing for the moment my accomplishments would be set aside for someone else's. It wasn't a transformation. Families don't transform overnight, and I was old enough not to want one. Transformations in families usually mean someone performed a version of themselves that didn't hold. What I wanted was something smaller and more durable, to be asked. To have the question mean something when it was asked. To not have to choose between being honest about my life and keeping the peace at dinner. I thought we might be moving, slowly, in that direction. There's a thing that happens when you've spent years being the person in a family who is quietly fine, quietly competent, quietly present, quietly not a problem, where you start to confuse being overlooked with being invisible. Like if no one's looking, maybe there's not much to see. I'd spent more time in that confusion than I like to admit. What the dinner at Harlow's did was not make me feel seen. I want to be precise about that. One conversation, one moment of recognition from Fletcher across a table, that's not the thing that changes you. You don't build yourself in front of other people. You build yourself over years of early mornings and unglamorous spreadsheets and phone calls where you have to hold your voice steady even when you're not sure about anything. What it did was make it harder for me to pretend the gap wasn't there. And maybe that's what needed to happen. Not the applause, just the refusal to keep filling in the silence myself. The Milwaukee project opened 7 months later. We flew in my contractor from the first hotel, kept the original terrazzo, 400 square feet of it, hand-restored by a guy in Kenosha who was one of 3 people in the Midwest who still knew how to do it. The service elevator became a glass-walled feature lift that ran through the center of the atrium. A journalist who covered hospitality spaces called it the most considered renovation of a historic building in the region in the last decade. My mom shared the article on her Facebook page with the caption, "My daughter designed this." 3 exclamation points. My dad texted me a photo of the post with a message that said, "Your mother is very proud, so am I." No punctuation, in the way of men of a certain generation who have not fully made their peace with punctuation. Holt sent a voice memo. He was walking somewhere. I could hear traffic. "Okay," he said. "I sent the article to 3 people I know. You're going to have to hire more people." "I mean it. Call me." I was standing in the lobby of the Milwaukee property when I got the voice memo. The morning light was coming through the atrium the exact way I had hoped it would. Warm, a little golden, diffuse enough to not overwhelm the plaster walls. One of the Aldridge Group directors was doing a walkthrough with me. He stopped near the elevator and said, "Every time I come into this building, I feel like I'm being welcomed somewhere." "That's what we were going for," I said. He nodded. "You got it." I stood there for another minute after he moved on, just standing in the light I had spent 3 years working toward. I didn't need anyone to come find me in that lobby and tell me what it was worth. I already knew what it was worth. I had known for a while. The knowing had just gotten louder. I've thought a lot about what actually happened that night at Harlow's. Not the part where Fletcher turned his phone around. That part only lasted about 30 seconds. I mean what led to it. The years before it. The choices that built the thing Fletcher found when he went looking. Here's what I know. Nobody handed me that contract. The Aldridge Group didn't find Harmon's studio because I was lucky or because I knew the right people at the right dinner. They found me because I had spent years doing the work quietly, without an audience, without anyone in my family asking about it. There's something clarifying about that, about building something in the absence of external validation. You find out pretty quickly whether you actually believe in what you're doing or whether you were mostly doing it for the applause. I had to learn to believe in it first. The applause, such as it was, came much later. What I keep coming back to is this: the people who underestimate you are not your problem to solve. I wasted real energy for real years, wishing my family would ask better questions, wishing Holt would notice, wishing my mom would track my work the way she tracked his. That energy could have gone into the Milwaukee lobby. It could have gone into hiring my 3rd employee 6 months earlier than I did. The resentment had a cost, and I was the one paying it. Jess, the designer, was not built in spite of being overlooked. She was built through the specific discipline of showing up for work on days when no one was watching and caring about the outcome anyway. That's not noble. I'm not describing a virtue I chose. I'm describing what happened when the alternative, which was waiting for permission, became more exhausting than just moving forward. The ethics of it are simple, even if they're not easy. You don't get to decide how other people treat you, but you get to decide what you build while they're not paying attention. You get to decide whether you become bitter about the gap between your effort and their recognition, or whether you let the gap be irrelevant. I chose irrelevance. I chose it imperfectly. On some days more successfully than others, but I chose it, and the intelligence of it, the part that took me longest to understand, is that clarity requires honesty. I had to be honest about the fact that my family's inattention was partly a pattern I had enabled. I had stopped bringing things up. I had made myself easy to overlook by not insisting on being seen. That's not self-blame, it's just accurate. Once I saw it clearly, I could stop waiting for them to change and start doing the one thing I actually had control over, being direct about my own life. My brother sat me at the kids' table because he had a picture of me in his head that was years out of date. The honest thing to do was not to perform for him. It was to keep building the thing that would eventually make that picture impossible to maintain. Fletcher did it faster than I would have, but the building was already done.